They call me Liv. Olivia Harding. Not Anderson. Not yet. My father built Anderson Global Investments into a titan, a roaring beast of finance that practically vibrated with power. He bled for it, sweat for it, sacrificed everything. He raised me to respect that, to understand that respect itself had to be earned, not handed out like party favors. That's why I buried myself in the bowels of the compliance department, using my mother's name, Harding, as a shield against the inevitable whispers of nepotism. Compliance. The word alone is enough to make most investment bankers shudder. We're the ones who pore over the fine print, the ones who wave the red flags, the ones who make sure nobody's playing fast and loose with the rules. The fun police. Except I loved it. Each violation I uncovered, each loophole I closed, felt like a victory. It was about protecting people, keeping the system honest. Or, at least, as honest as it could be in this cutthroat world. I climbed the ladder on my own merits, promotion after promotion. Harding, not Anderson. The pressure was immense, to be better, to be more than the name. Then Ryan walked into my life. Ryan Maxwell, 31, radiating ambition and charm, a junior partner at Maxwell Financial. We met at some insufferable charity gala in 2021. He was dazzling. He saw me. He listened to me ramble about regulatory frameworks and insider trading with genuine interest. He respected my drive, or at least he pretended to. He understood the industry, knew the players, but wasn't a direct rival to my father's firm. It felt safe. The first year was a dream. We were inseparable. Shared goals, shared values, shared everything. He never pushed me to leverage my compliance experience to grease the wheels of his deals. He never made me feel like I was playing second fiddle to his career. He proposed on our second anniversary, a ridiculously romantic beach setting, a speech about building a future together, a future that felt real. Olivia Harding, will you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife? He was on one knee, the ring shimmering under the moonlight. Yes, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I said yes without a flicker of doubt. Then the changes started. Small at first, almost imperceptible. A missed dinner because of a critical deal. A canceled weekend getaway due to an unforeseen emergency. It's the little things that erode trust, isn't it? The tiny cracks that spiderweb across a seemingly perfect foundation. And then there was Sarah. Sarah. The name alone leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. Ryan's new executive assistant. 26, perfectly polished, unnervingly efficient. Suddenly, every emergency required her presence. Late-night strategy sessions, weekend conferences, last-minute business trips. The excuses became more frequent, more elaborate, more transparent. I'm not stupid. I saw the way he looked at her, the lingering glances, the shared jokes that excluded me, the casual way she touched his arm while laughing, a touch that lingered a fraction too long. I needed proof, concrete evidence before I let my insecurities spiral out of control. So I hired someone, a private investigator. Sleazy, yes, but effective. Within a week, I had everything I needed. Photos of them entering hotel rooms. Receipts for romantic dinners charged to the company card as client meetings. Copies of their intimate emails sent through their work accounts. As a compliance officer, that last one made me want to scream. Never use company email for affairs, people. Seriously, it was amateur hour. The photos burned. The emails, they were like acid, eating away at the carefully constructed image I had of Ryan, of us. The receipts, they were just insulting. Devastation warred with rage. It wasn't just betrayal, it was stupid. They were using company resources to fund their little tryst, blatantly disregarding corporate policies. They were practically begging to get caught. And I, the idiot, had been blinded by what? Love? Hope? a desperate desire to believe in something real? That night, I sat in the dark, clutching the evidence. The city lights blurred through my tears. I felt hollowed out, emptied of everything that had made me, me. I wanted to scream, to break things, to lash out. But all I could do was sit there, numb, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. I went to work the next morning and stared blankly at my computer. I needed to pull myself together, to regain control. The first domino had fallen, and I didn't know where it would lead me. As I navigated the minefield of my emotions, a piece of information landed on my desk, a seemingly innocuous document that would change everything. Maxwell Financial was in trouble. Deep trouble. Their aggressive expansion strategy had backfired, leaving them drowning in debt. They needed a lifeline, and fast. That's when I discovered that my father's firm, Anderson Global Investments, was seriously considering acquiring them. The deal was strictly confidential, known only to a handful of major shareholders, myself included. Ryan had no idea that Maxwell's very survival hinged on this merger. Their stock was plummeting, regulators were circling like vultures, and competitors were picking off their best clients. He was living in a gilded cage, blissfully unaware of the storm raging outside. Initially, I planned to confront him privately, to rip into him, to demand answers. But then Maxwell announced their annual leadership conference, a 3-day extravaganza at a ridiculously opulent resort. Ryan insisted I attend. He framed it as a professional development opportunity, a chance for me, the basic compliance officer, to see how real business was conducted. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil, but I swallowed my pride. I wanted to see how far they would take this charade. The resort was a monument to excess. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, overflowing champagne fountains. It felt like a different planet. From the moment I arrived, the subtle humiliations began. Ryan introduced me to everyone as his pencil-pushing fiancé, the one who kept the boring parts of the industry running. Sarah was always by his side, a vision in designer clothes and carefully crafted smiles, making sure everyone knew she handled his real business matters. During the breakout sessions, they barely bothered to hide their connection. She'd adjust his tie, her fingers lingering a beat too long. He'd brush against her deliberately, their eyes locking in a silent exchange. They shared knowing smiles, smug in their little bubble of deceit, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. The wives of other executives started giving me pitying glances. The whispers followed me everywhere. Does she know? How can she not know? I endured 2 days of this elaborate charade, meticulously documenting every inappropriate interaction, every misused company resource. Each smirk, each stolen glance fueled the fire within me. The final night was a formal gala, a black tie affair where partners presented their yearly achievements. Ryan was scheduled to speak about Maxwell's exciting future prospects, a speech I knew was built on a foundation of lies and desperation. He took the stage, Sarah a constant presence just behind him. His presentation was all swagger and empty promises, the carefully crafted image of a man on top of the world. Then he went off script. And none of this would be possible without my incredible executive assistant, Sarah, he announced, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. She's proof that talent and ambition will always beat boring policy compliance. The room erupted in laughter. Sarah blushed prettily, basking in the spotlight. Several people glanced at me, their faces etched with smug amusement. Something inside me snapped. It was the casual cruelty, the blatant disrespect, the public humiliation. It was the final straw. Years! I'd spent years clawing my way up, earning respect in this industry, building my reputation from scratch, without ever leveraging my family name. I wasn't some pampered princess playing at a job. I was damn good at what I did, and I refused to be reduced to a punchline, a fool in a designer dress, by a cheating fraud and his ambitious mistress. I waited for the applause to die down, a cold calm settling over me. Then I walked calmly to the stage. Ryan looked annoyed, surprised by the interruption. "Liv, what are you doing?" he muttered, trying to usher me away from the microphone. I ignored him. I took the microphone. What an interesting perspective on compliance, I said, my voice sweet and deceptively innocent. But let me add some context. I turned to face the audience, the sea of expectant faces. Ryan, those hotel meetings with Sarah? The ones you billed as client expenses? That's fraud. A ripple of unease spread through the room. Ryan's face paled. Sarah took a step back, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crumble. The insider trading hints you've been emailing her from your work account? That's criminal. I paused for effect, letting the weight of my words sink in. Oh, and Sarah, using company cars for your weekend getaways? That's theft. The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Ryan's face was now the color of ash. Sarah was edging towards the exit, her eyes wide with panic. But here's the real punchline, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I'm not just a compliance officer. I'm Olivia Anderson. Yes, that Anderson. The family you're desperately hoping will save Maxwell Financial from bankruptcy. The silence shattered. A collective gasp swept through the room. Board members scrambled for their phones, their faces etched with panic. Sarah burst into tears. Ryan lunged at me, his composure completely gone. Liv, darling sweetheart, we can talk about this. He reached for my arm, his voice a desperate plea. But it was too late. Security intervened, two burly men stepping between us. I'd made sure they were well informed, armed with copies of all the evidence, hotel receipts, emails, photos, everything. Consider this my official recommendation against the merger, I said, my voice ringing with finality. Chaos erupted. Board members were shouting into their phones. Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, her mascara running down her face. Ryan was being escorted away by security, his protests fading into the rising din. I walked off the stage, head held high, the weight of the past few months lifting from my shoulders. It was done. The truth was out. The game was over. The next few days were explosive. Maxwell's stock plummeted 60% within hours of the news breaking that the Anderson merger was off the table. Trading was halted 3 times. Ryan was immediately fired for expense fraud and inappropriate workplace relationships, a sanitized euphemism that barely scratched the surface of his transgressions. Sarah resigned, but not before desperately trying to delete thousands of emails. Pro tip: company servers keep everything. The damage spread like wildfire. Other potential investors pulled out, spooked by the revelations. Our forensic accounting team, already suspicious, dug deeper and unearthed even more irregularities. Maxwell's board finally realized the horrifying truth. Their star partner's reckless behavior had not only jeopardized their reputation, but had also exposed a culture of corruption and mismanagement that ran rampant throughout the entire company. Regulators launched a formal investigation into Maxwell's books, widening the scope to include potential insider trading and market manipulation. The whole house of cards was collapsing. Ryan alternated between threats and desperate pleas. First, he accused me of destroying his life over a few harmless mistakes. Then, he offered to call off the wedding quietly if I would help him land softly somewhere else, maybe leverage my family connections. Finally, he tried guilt, whining about all the employees I was hurting with my actions. As if he hadn't been the one leading the company down this path. Sarah sent me a rambling, tear-soaked email claiming she was young and misguided and didn't know who I really was. She even had the audacity to suggest we work things out, woman to woman, over coffee. I promptly forwarded it to HR for their records. The industry fallout was intense. Ryan's banking license was suspended pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. Sarah was effectively blacklisted by every major firm. Turns out, nobody wants to hire an assistant with a proven track record of helping executives conceal misconduct. Their former colleagues, the ones who had smirked at my basic compliance job, were now frantically deleting social media posts and scrubbing their own records, terrified of being implicated. Maxwell Financial was being sold off in pieces, its reputation irrevocably tarnished. My father said they were doomed anyway, that the affair scandal had merely accelerated the inevitable. Their risk management was non-existent, their books were cooked, and their culture was toxic from the top down. Some smaller firms were cherry-picking their decent assets and stable clients. Ryan, predictably, was trying to find work in Silicon Valley, claiming that East Coast finance was too political. His LinkedIn profile listed him as a strategic consultant, but word travels fast in the banking world. Sarah was back in her hometown, working at her father's insurance agency. Their passionate affair seemed considerably less exciting without the expense account lifestyle to fuel it. My family's firm, ironically, had actually gained respect for enforcing clear ethical boundaries. Several major clients transferred their accounts to us, impressed by our strict compliance standards. They even joked that I had saved them millions by exposing Maxwell's issues before we bought them. The ring had been returned, the wedding canceled. And I was focusing on my career, throwing myself into my work, trying to piece together the fragments of my life. Some people thought I was too harsh, that I could have handled it privately. But why? They didn't keep their affair private. They didn't keep their mockery private. They chose to humiliate me in front of the entire industry. So I simply let the industry watch them fall. Looking back, I realized Ryan never loved me. He loved the idea of me, a compliant wife with a cute career that wouldn't overshadow his own ambitions. He assumed I was ordinary, and he thought ordinary meant weak. His biggest mistake wasn't the affair. It was underestimating the basic compliance officer who could see right through his fraud. The only thing I regretted was not seeing it sooner. Now, I could finally focus on my work without having to watch my fiancé parade his mistress through the office. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just exposing the affair, it's exposing everything else they were trying to hide. My dad always said, success means more when you earn it yourself. I earned my position, earned my reputation, and earned the right to stand up for myself. As for love, I'll find it again. But next time, I'll choose someone who values integrity as much as ambition. For now, I'm enjoying the peace of being single, the satisfaction of knowing I'll never again sit quietly while someone underestimates me. After all, in finance, reputation is everything. They stained mine, so I destroyed theirs. Fair exchange, as we say in banking. The most ironic part? Compliance officers are now the most respected people at Maxwell's remaining offices. Funny how quickly people learn to appreciate the boring rules when breaking them costs them everything. 6 months had passed since the gala. 6 months since I detonated a bomb in the middle of my carefully constructed life. The fallout, as it turned out, was even more dramatic than I could have predicted. The Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) launched a full-blown investigation into Maxwell's financials books after our compliance team's initial findings hinted at systemic problems. The investigation went far beyond Ryan and Sarah's petty theft. It wasn't just a case of an affair and misused expenses, it was the tip of the iceberg. The regulatory team discovered evidence of widespread misconduct, insider trading, market manipulation, and creative accounting that would make Enron blush. Ryan was formally charged with securities fraud, not just for the affair-related expenses, but for a pattern of illegal trades he'd been running through shell companies. Remember those client meetings at luxury hotels? Some of those clients were actually representatives of offshore entities, fronts for laundering illicit profits. Sarah wasn't just his mistress. She was an active accomplice, helping him hide documents from regulators and acting as a go-between for his shady deals. The investigation revealed that several other executives were involved in similar schemes, turning Maxwell Financial into a cesspool of corporate corruption. The entire leadership structure collapsed within weeks. The company's remaining assets were sold off at a fraction of their value. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, although most of the ethical ones were quickly snapped up by competing firms. The truly toxic ones, however, found themselves unemployable. Sarah tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Ryan in exchange for immunity, but her own paper trail was too incriminating. She was facing charges for conspiracy and evidence tampering. Her father's insurance agency dropped her like a hot potato after clients threatened to take their business elsewhere. She moved back in with her parents and started a life coaching Instagram account, posting inspirational quotes about surviving career setbacks and finding strength in adversity. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Ryan's life imploded spectacularly. His assets were frozen. His professional licenses were revoked. Most of his friends in the industry cut ties, terrified of being associated with the scandal. He tried claiming he was set up by me, that I had used my family connections to frame him, but nobody bought it, especially after forensic accountants traced years of suspicious transactions back to him. The wedding vendors I'd hired started suing him for unpaid deposits I'd insisted he handle those payments. A small act of passive-aggressive revenge. His luxury apartment lease was terminated when he couldn't make rent. Last I heard, he was living with his brother in New Jersey, working on a tell-all book about corporate corruption. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Then the plot thickened. 3 weeks ago, Sarah reached out through her lawyer. She claimed she had evidence that Ryan was planning to use our marriage to gain control of shares in my family's firm. Apparently, he'd been bragging to her about how he'd struck gold by dating the naive Anderson heiress who played at having a real job. They'd planned everything meticulously. After the wedding, he would pressure me to quit my compliance role, claiming it was beneath an Anderson. Then he'd manipulate me into transferring shares to joint accounts, giving him voting rights and influence over board decisions. Sarah would be promoted to a senior position within the firm, solidifying their power base. The joke was on them. My father's lawyers had already drafted an ironclad prenuptial agreement, and our shares are held in a family trust, virtually impenetrable. Their little scheme would have failed miserably. But the fact that they saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to power, a pawn in their twisted game, made my blood boil. Some of Ryan's former colleagues started coming forward with similar stories. He had a history of dating women for their connections, then discarding them after getting what he wanted. Several had complained to HR, but Maxwell's toxic culture had protected their star partner. Sarah wasn't even his first assistant turned mistress. She was just the most ambitious. The industry response had been fascinating to watch. Multiple firms had strengthened their compliance departments, realizing that proper oversight wasn't just bureaucracy, it was essential for survival. My father's company had been flooded with applications from compliance professionals eager to work for an ethically run firm. We'd even had former Maxwell clients practically begging to transfer their accounts to us. My personal life had taken some unexpected turns, too. Remember Tom, the conference security chief who helped me gather evidence? He turned out to be a genuinely good guy, refreshingly honest and down to earth. We'd been getting coffee regularly, talking about ethics in finance and the importance of integrity. No hidden agendas, no power plays. I wasn't ready for a relationship, but it was nice knowing there were still sincere people left in this world. Tom said what drew his attention wasn't just the scandal itself, but how I handled it, professionally, methodically, with evidence rather than emotion. High praise from someone who had spent 20 years spotting deception. The most vindicating moment came last week. Harvard Business School contacted me about using the Maxwell case in their ethics curriculum. They wanted me to give a guest lecture about the importance of compliance and the real cost of corporate fraud. Ryan, who had always mocked my basic career, was now the subject of a business school case study, and I was the one teaching future executives about the importance of ethics. Sarah tried to launch a competing speaking tour about corporate transparency, but her credibility was shot. She even reached out through mutual friends, suggesting we co-author a book about the experience. Hard pass. I had no interest in helping her rehabilitate her image or profit from her own misconduct. Ryan's brother called recently, saying Ryan had changed and wanted to apologize in person. Apparently, he had found religion in New Jersey and wanted to make amends. I declined. Some bridges should stay burned. Besides, my lawyer suggested that any meeting could be an attempt to gather information for his book or upcoming trial. The wedding venue called, offering to refund my deposits despite their no refund policy. The owner's daughter had gone through something similar and wanted to show solidarity. I donated the money to a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy to domestic violence survivors. It seemed fitting to use Ryan's lost deposits to help people spot manipulation and protect themselves. My compliance team had grown significantly. We had implemented new fraud detection systems and strengthened reporting procedures. Several whistleblowers had come forward at other firms, citing our handling of the Maxwell case as inspiration. The boring department was now seen as the company's backbone. My dad jokes that I saved the family billions by exposing Maxwell before the merger. My mom is just happy I discovered Ryan's true nature before walking down the aisle. My younger sister, who is starting her career in finance, says I've made compliance work cool. That might be stretching it, but at least people take us seriously now. Looking ahead, I'm focused on expanding our oversight capabilities. We're developing AI tools to catch the kind of fraud Ryan perpetrated. Several regulators have asked for our input on new financial conduct guidelines. It's satisfying to turn this whole nightmare into positive industry change. Sometimes I wonder if I was too public with the exposure. Then I remember how they humiliated me in front of everyone, how they planned to use my family's reputation for their gain, how many people they hurt with their schemes. They chose their path. I just showed everyone where it led. The ring has been sold, with the proceeds going to a fraud victim recovery fund. The planned honeymoon villa in Tuscany has been rebooked for a compliance department leadership retreat. Life has a sense of humor sometimes. For those wondering if I regret anything, the answer is a complicated one. I only regret that I didn't spot the red flag sooner, that I allowed myself to be blinded by hope and a desire to believe in something that wasn't real. But that's the thing about financial fraud and personal betrayal. The warning signs are always clearer in hindsight. At least I can use this experience to help others protect themselves, both professionally and personally. So here I am, still at my basic job, but now I'm expanding our compliance division internationally. Sarah's lawyer keeps floating cooperation deals, but her credibility is shot. Ryan's book deal fell through after publishers fact-checked his claims and found them riddled with inconsistencies and outright lies. Karma doesn't always work this perfectly, but when it does, it's magnificent to watch. The biggest lesson I've learned is that success built on deception eventually crumbles. Ryan and Sarah thought they were brilliant manipulators, but now they're cautionary tales in business ethics courses. Meanwhile, I'm building something real, something based on integrity and actual expertise. That's the best revenge, not just exposing their fraud, but thriving in ways they never could because they chose shortcuts over substance. In the end, the boring compliance officer outlasted the star partner. Sometimes, following the rules isn't just right, it's revolutionary. Life had settled into a new normal, a rhythm I cautiously embraced. The spotlight had faded, the dust had settled, and I was left standing, stronger than I ever imagined. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, a life defined not by betrayal and heartbreak, but by resilience and purpose. Tom, the security chief, had become a constant source of support, a grounding presence in the still turbulent waters of my life. Our coffee dates evolved into something more, a tentative exploration of shared values and mutual respect. He wasn't flashy or ambitious, he was simply genuine. He saw me, not as Olivia Anderson, heiress to a financial empire, but as Olivia Harding, the determined compliance officer who had stared down corruption and emerged victorious. One evening, over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, he shared something that deepened my respect for him. He had grown up in a tough neighborhood, surrounded by crime and poverty. His father, a hard-working construction worker, had instilled in him a strong sense of right and wrong. Tom had joined the security force to protect people, to make a difference in a world often defined by greed and self-interest. "I admire what you did, Liv," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "It takes guts to stand up to power, especially when that power is wrapped in money and influence." His words resonated deeply. He understood the sacrifices I had made, the risks I had taken. He wasn't impressed by my family's wealth or status. He was impressed by my character. As I navigated the complexities of my new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar faces in the crowd, notice cars that seemed to linger a little too long outside my apartment. I dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering effects of the trauma I had endured. But then, one afternoon, I received a cryptic message from an anonymous source. The email contained a single sentence: "Beware the shadows. They haven't forgotten." The message sent a chill down my spine. It was a stark reminder that Ryan and Sarah weren't the only players in this game. They were just puppets, manipulated by powerful forces that remained hidden in the shadows. I contacted my father's security team, the same team that had helped me gather evidence against Ryan. They launched an investigation, scouring the internet for clues, monitoring my phone and email for suspicious activity. The investigation revealed a network of offshore accounts and shell corporations linked to Ryan's illicit activities. These entities were controlled by a shadowy group of investors who had profited handsomely from Ryan's schemes. They were the real masterminds behind the Maxwell financial fraud, and they weren't happy that I had exposed their operation. I realized that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than a simple case of corporate misconduct. I had uncovered a web of corruption that reached into the highest echelons of the financial world, and now I was a target. My father, understandably, was furious. He wanted to pull me out of compliance, to protect me from the danger I was facing. But I refused. I couldn't back down now. I had a responsibility to expose the truth, to hold these criminals accountable for their actions. Tom, ever supportive, offered to stay with me, to provide round-the-clock protection. His presence was reassuring, a shield against the fear that threatened to consume me. As we delved deeper into the investigation, we uncovered a shocking connection. One of the key players in the shadowy network was a close associate of my father, a man he had trusted for years. The betrayal cut deep, shaking my father's faith in the people he had surrounded himself with. The revelation created a rift between us, a tension that simmered beneath the surface of our conversations. He couldn't understand why I was putting myself in danger, why I was willing to risk everything to expose these criminals. "Liv, you've done enough," he pleaded, his voice laced with concern. "Let the authorities handle it." "You don't have to be a hero." "I'm not trying to be a hero, Dad," I replied, my voice firm. "I'm just trying to do what's right. These people have caused so much harm. They need to be stopped," he sighed, his shoulders slumping with defeat. "Just be careful, Liv. Please." I nodded, knowing that my decision had created a chasm between us. But I couldn't back down. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. The investigation led us down a rabbit hole of encrypted communications, hidden assets, and anonymous shell corporations. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. The threats escalated, becoming more direct, more personal. Someone had hacked into my email account and was sending veiled messages, taunting me, reminding me that I was being watched. One night, as I was working late in my office, the lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. Panic seized me as I fumbled for my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, his face obscured by a baseball cap. "You should have listened to your father," he said, his voice a low growl. "This isn't your fight." He lunged at me, and I screamed, throwing my chair in his path. He stumbled, giving me a precious few seconds to escape. I ran out of the office, into the deserted hallway, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I called Tom, my hands shaking uncontrollably. He arrived within minutes, his face grim. He swept the office, searching for the intruder, but he was gone. The attack was a clear message. They wanted me to back off. They were willing to use violence to silence me. Tom insisted that I move into his apartment, where he could protect me around the clock. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to take that step, but the fear was overwhelming, and I knew I couldn't face this alone. As I packed my bags, I received another anonymous message. This one was different, more personal, more sinister. It contained a picture of my mother, taken years ago, before she had passed away. The message read, "Some things are better left buried." The threat against my mother sent me over the edge. It was no longer just about me. It was about my family, my legacy. I couldn't allow these criminals to desecrate her memory. I made a reckless decision. I decided to confront them head-on. I contacted the anonymous source who had sent me the cryptic messages, demanding a meeting. To my surprise, they agreed. The meeting was set for a secluded location on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned warehouse that reeked of decay and neglect. Tom vehemently opposed the idea, warning me that it was a trap. But I was determined to face my enemies, to expose them for who they were. I went to the warehouse alone, armed with a hidden camera and a recording device. As I stepped inside, I was met by a group of men, their faces hidden in the shadows. In the center of the room stood the man who had attacked me in my office, his eyes glinting with malice. "You're a fool, Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You should have stayed out of this. Who are you working for?" I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. "Who ordered you to silence me?" He smirked. "That's not something you need to know. All you need to know is that your meddling ends here." He raised his hand, and the other men stepped forward, their eyes filled with menace. I knew I was in grave danger. But then, a voice boomed from the shadows. "That's where you're wrong." Tom stepped into the warehouse, followed by a team of armed security officers. He had anticipated my move, knowing that I wouldn't be deterred. He had followed me, prepared to protect me, no matter the cost. A fierce gunfight erupted. Bullets flew through the air, shattering glass and tearing through metal. I ducked for cover, my heart pounding in my chest. Tom and his team fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. The intruders were skilled and ruthless, and they were determined to silence me. As the gunfight raged, I noticed one of the men slipping away, heading towards a back exit. I knew that he was the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. Without hesitation, I ran after him, ignoring Tom's desperate pleas. I chased him through the maze of corridors, my adrenaline pumping, my fear replaced by a fierce determination. The chase led us through the bowels of the warehouse, a labyrinth of rusted pipes, crumbling concrete, and forgotten debris. The air was thick with the smell of decay and desperation. I could hear the man's heavy breathing ahead, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. I rounded a corner and found myself in a vast, open space, the warehouse's loading dock. The man was standing by a waiting car, his hand on the door handle. "It's over," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "You can't escape." He turned to face me, his face finally illuminated by the dim light of the loading dock. I gasped, my blood running cold. It was Mr. Graham, my father's longtime associate, the man he had trusted implicitly for decades. "Olivia," he said, his voice laced with regret. "I didn't want it to come to this." "Why, Mr. Graham?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this? Why would you betray my father?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping with defeat. "It's a long story, Olivia. One you wouldn't understand. Try me," I said, my eyes narrowed. "I think I'm starting to understand a lot more than you realize." He hesitated, then began to speak, his voice low and somber. He revealed a tale of greed, ambition, and betrayal that stretched back years. He had been secretly siphoning money from Anderson Global Investments, using a network of offshore accounts and shell corporations to conceal his activities. Ryan Maxwell had been one of his pawns, a tool to manipulate the market and generate illicit profits. Your father was too honest, too idealistic, Mr. Graham said, his voice laced with bitterness. He wouldn't have approved of what I was doing. I had to protect myself, protect my investment, so you were willing to destroy everything my father built just to protect your own greed? I asked, my voice filled with disgust. He nodded, his eyes filled with a cold, calculating light. It was necessary. And what about Sarah? I asked. Was she in on it? She was a useful idiot, he said dismissively. She knew enough to be helpful, but not enough to be dangerous. I felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that threatened to consume me. I couldn't believe that this man, this trusted advisor, had been plotting against my family for so long. It's over, Mr. Graham, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm going to expose you. I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. He smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a chill down my spine. I don't think so, Olivia. You know too much. You're a liability. I can't let you leave here alive. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gun. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew I was in mortal danger. Just as he was about to fire, Tom burst into the loading dock, his gun drawn. He fired a shot, hitting Mr. Graham in the arm. Mr. Graham dropped the gun and cried out in pain. Tom rushed to my side, his face etched with relief. Are you okay, Liv? I nodded, my voice shaking. I'm okay, but he. Before I could finish my sentence, Mr. Graham lunged at me, grabbing me around the neck. He pulled me close, his grip tightening, cutting off my air supply. If I'm going down, he said, his voice a strained whisper, I'm taking you with me. I struggled against him, clawing at his hands, desperately trying to break free. But he was too strong. My vision began to blur, my lungs burning for air. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, Tom tackled Mr. Graham, knocking him to the ground. He wrestled the older man into submission, securing him with handcuffs. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my body trembling. Tom knelt beside me, his eyes filled with concern. Liv, are you all right? He asked, his voice laced with panic. I nodded weakly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I think so. He helped me to my feet, holding me close as we waited for the police to arrive. As I stood there, wrapped in Tom's arms, I realized how close I had come to losing everything. I had faced my enemies, exposed their crimes, and narrowly escaped with my life. The aftermath of the warehouse confrontation was a whirlwind of police investigations, media scrutiny, and legal battles. Mr. Graham, along with several other accomplices, was arrested and charged with a multitude of crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The scandal rocked Anderson Global Investments to its core, shaking the foundation that my father had painstakingly built. The news of Mr. Graham's betrayal hit my father hard. He was devastated that someone he had trusted for so long could have been capable of such treachery. He withdrew into himself, questioning his judgment, his instincts, his entire life's work. I tried to comfort him, to reassure him that he wasn't to blame, but the damage had been done. The trust between us had been fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be fully repaired. The trial was a long and grueling affair. Mr. Graham and his co-conspirators fought tooth and nail, attempting to smear my name, to discredit my evidence, to paint themselves as victims of a corporate conspiracy. But the truth was on my side, and I refused to be intimidated. I testified with unwavering conviction, detailing the intricate web of deceit that Mr. Graham had spun. I presented irrefutable evidence, exposing his lies and revealing his true motives. In the end, justice prevailed. Mr. Graham was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. His accomplices received similar punishments. The shadowy network he had created was dismantled, its assets seized, and its members brought to justice. The Maxwell financial scandal, combined with Mr. Graham's treachery, had taken a heavy toll on Anderson Global Investments. The company's reputation had been tarnished, its stock price had plummeted, and its future was uncertain. My father, determined to restore the company's integrity, made sweeping changes, overhauling the management structure, strengthening the compliance department, and implementing stricter ethical guidelines. He also made a public apology, taking responsibility for the mistakes that had allowed Mr. Graham's scheme to flourish. The road to recovery was long and arduous, but Anderson Global Investments slowly began to heal. The company regained its footing, its reputation gradually restored, its future once again bright. As for Ryan and Sarah, their lives remained in ruins. Ryan's legal troubles continued to mount, and he faced the prospect of spending many years behind bars. Sarah, ostracized by the financial community, struggled to find work and was haunted by the consequences of her actions. I never heard from either of them again. In the aftermath of the scandal, I made a difficult decision. I stepped down from my position in the compliance department. The events of the past year had changed me, leaving me with a deep sense of disillusionment. I needed time to heal, to rebuild, to find a new purpose in my life. I took a sabbatical, traveling the world, exploring new cultures, and immersing myself in different experiences. I volunteered for a non-profit organization that provided financial literacy training to underprivileged communities. I discovered a passion for helping others, for empowering people to take control of their financial lives. When I returned, I joined the board of directors of Anderson Global Investments, determined to use my experience to ensure that the company never again strayed from its ethical principles. I also established a foundation in my mother's name dedicated to promoting financial literacy and ethical conduct in the financial industry. Tom remained by my side throughout it all, a constant source of love and support. Our relationship deepened, evolving into a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared values. We were a team, facing the challenges of life together. Years later, as I looked back on the events that had turned my life upside down, I realized that they had ultimately made me a stronger, more resilient person. I had faced my demons, confronted my enemies, and emerged victorious. The scars remained, a reminder of the pain and betrayal I had endured. But they were also a testament to my strength, my courage, and my unwavering commitment to justice. I had learned that the financial world was a treacherous place, filled with greed, ambition, and corruption. But I had also learned that there were still good people in the world, people who valued integrity, honesty, and compassion. And I was determined to be one of those people. To use my power and influence to make a positive impact on the world, to create a more just and equitable financial system for all. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but I was ready to face whatever obstacles came my way. I had found my purpose, my calling, and I would not rest until I had achieved my goals. After all, I was Olivia Harding, and I had a legacy to uphold. The years passed, each one etching new lines of wisdom and resilience onto my face. Anderson Global Investments thrived under my father's continued leadership and my increasingly active role on the board. The foundation in my mother's name flourished, impacting countless lives with its financial literacy programs and ethical training initiatives. My relationship with my father slowly mended, the chasm of distrust filled with a newfound appreciation for each other's strengths. He understood now that my pursuit of justice wasn't a reckless act of rebellion, but a deep-seated commitment to the values he had instilled in me. Tom and I built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and shared purpose. We traveled the world, supporting causes close to our hearts, and raising awareness about the importance of ethical conduct in the financial industry. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we strolled through Central Park, Tom stopped and turned to me, his eyes filled with tenderness. He took my hand in his touch sending a familiar warmth through my veins. "Olivia," he said, his voice soft and sincere, "I've been wanting to ask you something for a long time." He knelt down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. My heart leaped into my throat. "Olivia Harding," he said, his voice trembling slightly, Will you marry me? Will you spend the rest of your life with me, building a future together based on love, trust, and shared purpose? Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I had already found my soulmate, my partner, my best friend. But this moment, this declaration of love, sealed our bond in a way I had never imagined. Yes, Tom, I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, a simple band of platinum, symbolizing the enduring strength of our love. We embraced, our hearts overflowing with joy and gratitude. As we walked hand in hand through the park, the setting sun casting a golden glow on our faces, I knew that I had finally found peace. The scars of the past still lingered, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to embrace my pain, to use my experience to create a better future for myself and for others. I had emerged from the darkness, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had found love, purpose, and a renewed sense of hope. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way, knowing that I had Tom by my side and that together we could overcome anything. My journey had been long and arduous, filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and danger, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and ultimately triumph. I was Olivia Harding, and I had finally found my happily ever after. A happily ever after forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the pursuit of justice, and illuminated by the enduring power of love.